Hey, Emily.
Hi.
Hi. I've got an air conditioner running in this room. Can you hear it, the background on it, really loud?
No.
Okay, great.
I also have a fan. So I hear my fan. So
Okay. I can't hear your fan. So
Okay.
I just needed to make sure. Thanks.
What? Oh, I'll put it. Yeah.
Hi, Nan.
Good morning.
Can you hear the background noise in mine? Okay, good.
Can't.
Really hoping to be able to keep this air conditioning unit on.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You've got a little bit of an echo today, though.
Okay. I'm gonna sign out. All right, we'll try this again. Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Your video is.
There's no echo. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Actually, John, I'm not sure there isn't an echo. Can you say something?
I can say something.
What do you think, Sarah? Does that sound like an echo to you?
I mean, it's a little tinny, but it doesn't seem to be echoing.
Okay.
It looks like John's in the meeting twice. That might be the reason there's an echo.
So I actually think it's Lisa that's also on just under John's name.
Ah,
But John was, when there was an echo, John was on 3 times, so.
okay.
I just wanted to make sure you saw and heard me.
There are so many Johns. I knew there was more than one of you. The only way you're getting the work done. Hi, Dorothy. Good to see you.
Hi.
Thanks for coming today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Sarah.
Unmute myself. Morning, everyone.
Hey, David.
Hey,
Morning.
David.
Hi. Hi. How are you guys?
Megan.
Where's Bono today, Megan? He's not joining us.
Nope. I'm relegated to the basement, David.
Probably cooler.
A little bit, yeah, for sure. Quieter, for sure. Hi, Dorothy. Thanks for joining.
I'll give it about 1 more minute until we join. We're at a pretty steady number of people hanging out with us.
Sarah, will I be able to share my screen?
I will give you those capabilities.
All right, excellent.
So I think it's going to make you a co-host, and then that should allow you to do that. And Megan, I'm going to make you a co-host as well, just in case.
Okay. I'm just going to stop my video for a second, pull up some files.
I had a parent bring me some flowers from her garden, so I wanted to make sure they made today's video.
Very nice. Brightens everything. Megan and David, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Ready.
Okay, so I will officially call the meeting to order at 10:33 a.m.
Okay, Sarah, before we jump into things, I would like to, I don't know if I have to officially make a motion, but I'd like to, if we can, switch the agenda a little bit. I feel like there's been a lot of moving parts over the past 24 hours.
Yeah.
I don't think Michelle's here yet. So I was hoping if we could do section 5 while we've got Dorothy and replace it with section 2.
Okay, you mean just flip-flop them?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so
So just a motion to take out of order, right? By the way, before I mess this up, is Lisa on? I don't see her.
Lisa is on. She doesn't have any video or voice capabilities though, so she's the other John Bucky.
Okay, but I don't need to take minutes. She's doing it.
She-
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I didn't mess that up.
Okay, so yeah, so can I have a motion to take the agenda out of order?
So moved.
I moved by Megan,
Seconded.
seconded by Sarah. All right, all in favor, Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron,
Yes.
Sarah Fox,
Yes.
David Harris,
Yes.
and Megan Taylor.
Yes.
All right, so we will flip-flop number 2 and number 5, and that doesn't change or move up the reentry planning or other important, like, very important things as far as anybody who's tuned in to the public. All right, so that brings us right up to the school communication discussion items. And so we have a district council discussion as well as a school committee internal communication discussion. We have Dorothy Presser, our Massachusetts School Committee state representative, here with us today, and she's going to kind of be part of our guide. So we will start, just to keep with the agenda as it is, we can start with the district council discussion. So there's a few kind of housekeeping pieces that seem to make a lot of sense on this agenda and most likely on further agendas as well. Just as we have a new permanent superintendent and kind of looking over some of the pieces that are currently in place at the district and whether we want to stick with those pieces or change things up a little bit. So part of that is looking into district council, so our legal representation for school committee, as well as this is a group that John would be able to utilize to help with any kind of legal issues within the district as well. So Megan had emailed everyone Dorothy's PowerPoint presentation. So hopefully everybody had a chance to flip through those slides. So John, do you have anything to kind of add on this discussion before we sort of open it up?
No, I just, I thought Dorothy would go through her presentation, and then at the conclusion of that, I might talk a little bit about my thinking around the topic. Okay,
great. So Dorothy, I don't think, unless you want to go through all of your slides, I don't think you had planned to do that.
No, I did not.
No pressure to do that.
Well, then I'll jump in with my thinking.
Can I make a suggestion, John, here? Just because we did send, everyone has had a copy of the PowerPoint. So maybe we just started, Sarah, with, because that was really meant to set the scene in terms of roles and responsibilities and the process. So maybe if we just started with, if there's any questions kind of in terms of roles and responsibilities before we jump into, how we want to move forward.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So any questions on
I may have missed it, but when I went through and reviewed everything in the Dropbox yesterday, I didn't see this in the Dropbox.
I sent it separately.
It was in an email because it wasn't going to be presented formally on this meeting, so it was just in the email.
Okay. It was from Megan?
From Megan. So, David or Emily, do you guys have any questions or thoughts on any of it? So
I don't think I do. I'm just going to bring it back up.
I think one of my main questions is the process. So if we do decide to look into what options are out there, Dorothy, the best process for doing that, because I know there's been a little bit of behind the scenes discussion on the need for an RFP and how that would go out, and whether or not we officially need that. So I think that would be sort of that's been this question circling in my head.
So it's someone who's you're hiring basically as a consultant. So it's different than needing an RFP based on a different type of service. Like if you were going out and purchasing new boilers for your schools, that's an entirely different process that you would need an RFP for. This is your decision of which consultant that you hire. So you can, if you want to see, what's out there and expand your choices, but there's no requirement that for this you put out an RFP.
Okay. Is in your experience, Dorothy, is there a way that school committees usually, do they usually put out an RFP, or do they usually send just some type of letter? I mean, I don't think that there's hundreds of these firms in our area. So do they just kind of send a letter to all or some firms?
So there's an organization called the Council of School Attorneys that you can find the list of the attorneys that belong to that organization on our website, and those would all be firms that represent school committees. So generally, if school committees decide to send out an RFP, they would use that list as the place to send it out, or just a letter, soliciting soliciting interest and something that says, what can you do for us? Then they might look over those packages that they receive, invite some people in for interviews. It's also not an unusual process for a new superintendent to come in with experience working with a particular firm that they feel comfortable with, and particularly since you're already thinking about making a change, to see if the school committee also feels comfortable with that firm.
Okay.
So one thing I just, in Dorothy's presentation I just pulled up, it talks about one of the reasons, one of the driving factors for having legal counsel beyond, obviously the legal piece, is that it provides institutional knowledge where there is, turnover of various members. I think that is actually really important in our situation in particular, where almost our entire central administration is brand new. And for all intents and purposes, our school committee is very, very new and green as well. I mean, David has more experience, but everybody else is, 2 years at best. Where we've had a lot of carryover with legal issues, particularly from past administrations. I am concerned, switching legal counsel right now, of losing that institutional knowledge. And for me, while I would welcome the idea of looking at possibly new counsel, I wonder if maybe this is not the year to do it, if that perhaps we should maintain that institutional knowledge for this year, just for that transition piece. And, you know, then maybe look at it later on, because in the last few months, we've all had some surprises, but that weren't as surprising to them, or they had little bits in the background. So I just, for the institutional knowledge piece, we'll just put it that way. I don't know where my comfort level is with this.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. I thought that was a really interesting point on that page that I had not thought of. So that I hear you on that one.
Dorothy, do any other school districts that you know of rely on town council? Because I know legally town council represents us as well, and we could rely on town council, but is that done or no?
It is done. It's sometimes hard for town council if they're representing the select board as well as the school committee. It happens. Sometimes I think it makes it hard on town council to sort of thread the needle sometimes if there are issues between the different bodies, the different boards in the town.
Well, in that circumstance, my understanding would be that they would always err on the side of the selectmen because they're protecting the town as a whole. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Well, if they're representing you, that's where, if they're representing you, they're representing you. They're representing the selectmen, they're representing the selectmen. If you guys have issues between the two of you, that puts the town council in sort of a pickle.
Well, yeah, because the selectmen are the client of record, just like on with our letter of engagement, we're the client of record.
Yep, yep.
So can I just ask a quick question? This is
Absolutely.
because I'm new. So do we currently have legal counsel for the school committee, and this is just to change?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We use
So
Valeria and Associates.
But what is bringing up the idea to change?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, David.
if I could, so we're looking to get information on, we talked about this, Sarah mentioned it, what are the level of services being provided, and how do we engage our council, and what are the duties and responsibilities, and so on and so forth. And I think it's just sound business practices. This is, we are, over the years, we do try and put various pieces of our work out to bid. And, this is an area that I think just it would be a, good sound business practice. And it doesn't mean that Valerio couldn't present their package to us as well, and they could continue to be retained. So I don't think it's necessarily a blanket request for a change, but we just think it would be reasonable to go through the process. Also, we do have collective bargaining coming up very shortly, which is a major role that legal counsel plays for the town and the school committee. So I think it would just be good to get an overall understanding. And, for me, I've only ever seen the legal counsel from afar. Of course, we've had executive sessions where we have met in person, but, I'd like to just see more of a collective package about what firms have to offer, and how we could streamline the process and the use of legal counsel within the district. That's my thought.
Yeah. And so the idea of it was actually sort of jostled around a little bit last year as well, but it just was such a crazy year, and we just had Bill for that 1 year that we've again, like kind of to Sarah's point, we stuck with the institutional knowledge aspect of things, got through the year, and then one of the big reasons that we had discussed it last year was, to David's point, the budgetary piece to it. Is let's, as we're looking into all of this, let's really make sure that we've dotted every I and crossed every T in kind of shoring up every piece of our budget stuff.
So one thing I will say is I have at different times wondered if we should shop. If we start to shop, the legal community as I'm sure like every other sub-niche of communities, they talk. And so if we start shopping, we are putting a message out, we are not happy with Valerio. So we need to move on. There's two reasons why clients and attorneys break up. And it's either the attorney can't help the client anymore and is done with them, or the client feels that the attorney is not meeting their needs. So if we are saying we're done with Valeria, that's one discussion. But I think we need to be clear that, in my opinion, having seen how this kind of happens, you know, from a different point of, you know, from a different point of view, is I think if we're shopping, we're leaving Valeria.
Dorothy, in terms of school committee representation, is that your experience with this as well?
I would say Sarah's probably on target with that.
Okay.
Yes. I would think, you know, there's probably instances where people do, or committees do what you are talking about is, you know, it's time to review. But generally, if people are reviewing, it's because there's something behind them deciding to do that.
Okay.
I will say from conversations I've had with various different administration in town, both on the town side and the school side in the last year, we do have more legal stuff than is typical for districts. So I just don't know if now is the time to kind of switch horses mid-race, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. John, did you want to put your 2 cents in?
Sure. I had some conversation with Bill when I came in about this because he indicated that the conversation was already happening. So I think there's a case to be made on both sides. With as much as we have going on right now, is now the time to enter this conversation. And then on the opposite side, this may be the most timely to have this conversation with 6 collective bargaining things coming up and just shopping. I don't think people would be surprised with the new superintendent of schools coming in that this conversation came up. I actually reached out to several superintendents, and it's pretty common for this conversation when there is a change in administration. That said, if we go in a different direction, okay. If we stay with current council, I'm fine with that as well.
Dorothy, not to put you on the spot, but you have more school committee experience than all of us literally combined in all your time. Who did Linfield use, and did you find that switching it up was good?
We had a long-time attorney who retired, so that forced us into finding new representation. And I'm just, you know, what's right for one community, what's right for one committee is not necessarily right for another. So I think who we use is actually irrelevant to your discussion because it's a decision that you're going to need to make about how you feel comfortable with.
So,
well, I haven't offered my 2 cents yet. Do you want to?
go ahead. Yes, because
I'll just give my 2 cents on this. Is that, you know, I do think now is the right time, and it's not necessarily. I think it's more for what David said. Like, I would really like to understand what is available out there, given our current and projected needs. And, you know, I think Sarah's point is valid. I would say that's probably based on, you know, historical data, and that's, you know, hopefully not how we're going to proceed. But I do think we should kind of understand what the whole package is and view that from a fiduciary lens.
I will say knowing the legal industry, their hourly rate is not in the high side at all. If this is a fiduciary lens, it's very reasonable, actually.
Well, it's not necessarily just down to dollars, but what are you getting for those dollars? And, you know, comparing, I do think the comparison is worthwhile too. Comparing the quality and the breadth of the services. And I just think, you know, with John coming in and a new administration, and as he said, you know, knowing that we're going to be going through, you know, a pretty comprehensive collective bargaining phase this year, I do think this is probably the time to at least review it. And again, it's not saying that we're 100% making a change, but it's worth kind of having the review and make sure that we've got all the information at our disposal to make the right decision. And I don't feel like we've got that. I don't feel like we've got that information right now.
I just want to make sure this is about the quality of their work and not who they've worked with in the past.
Absolutely.
So
If I may, through the chair.
yes.
I think the timing is right for the exploration. If we stay with the current council, great, but I think that it will be information, fact-finding for the committee, and you can see comparatively what services, what your return on investment is, and I don't think the exploration is without merit.
That continues to be how I feel as well. And I wonder if choose to send a letter, or I guess it could be an RFP as well, but just sort of if we can word it in such a way that it doesn't come across that we're, you know, upset with Valerio in any way, and that, you know, we're done with them, and that we're simply sort of in a due diligence mode, and looking at everything that's out there. Dorothy, is that a pipe?
Yeah, and I would say if that's the direction you want to go in sort of the vein of no surprises, I would certainly let Valerio, Dominello, and Hillman know ahead of time that that's what you're doing and your rationale.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't want to pull that as a surprise on them. So,
do we need a motion then?
that's what I was just going to ask. Can I get a motion to, and I guess before I ask for a motion, it doesn't sound like we are mandated to put the RFP out there. So I guess in my head, I would support the creation of a letter, and then maybe we bring it back next time at our next meeting, or at a subsequent meeting if it doesn't make the most sense for the next meeting. Look at the letter, look at the list that Dorothy has on the MASC website, and go from there.
You know, I would ask, honestly, John's input here, if he's got someone that he's worked with previously that he could recommend. I mean, especially because he is our incoming superintendent and has some experience there. And that's, you know, I would like to start there personally.
Yeah.
I've worked with different firms, but for the last 20 years, Stoneman, Chandler, and Miller in Boston has been the counsel in each district. We've used Mike Long for some employment law stuff. Special education counsel in each of the districts I have been in has been different from other counsel, and in my conversations with Eric Oxford, he is very happy with the counsel that he has for special ed, so I would not want to change that. This would just be, there are not a lot of firms out there. And so if you reached out to a couple, three, Stoneman, Chandler, and Miller would be my first choice for them to have an opportunity to present to you, if that's what you're asking.
I would also say that if you may not receive information back from every place that you send it out. Just when you send out an RFP, not everybody responds. So, you know, that's something else to keep in mind. And John is absolutely 100% correct that more often than not, I would say that the council used for special education is a different firm than the council used for labor, personnel, student type issues.
So what I'm hearing then is that we draw up a letter, that the motion would be more that we draw up a letter and send it to what sounds like the handful of firms out there and see who replies.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
I would go along with that as well.
Yep.
Okay. So can I get a motion to have can I get a motion to have Megan and myself work with John to write up a letter to be sent to the legal firms on MASC's list of recommendations?
Recommendations. So moved.
David moved,
Second.
Megan second. All right, so any discussion around that?
So
I
Dorothy,
just-
can you remind me approximately how many are on that list? Is it like 10 or 30 or?
It's going to be more in line with 30, but when you look at the list, there's going to be places you obviously are not going to send because they are attorneys that are employed by the school district. So, you know, like a big school district, a big city might have their own attorney that they hire specifically for them and is not part of a firm. So so you won't send to the entire list, and between John and your business manager, they'll be able to look at the list and determine who's the appropriate, where the appropriate places to send it are.
Okay. All right.
Because some of them may not even be regional enough. They may be based out of Springfield, Massachusetts, for instance, or not in an area where they could serve us too, I would guess. So that would be great to get that recommendation from Michelle and John.
Okay.
And I think that just to sort of say, if Megan and John and I have any issues where we feel like this needs to be brought back to the committee at our next meeting, then I won't hesitate to do that.
And Sarah, do we need the committee approval on that letter, or can we kind of get that sent out and maybe have some, feedback anyway by the 10th?
That sort of, I think in the way that I stated the motion, my hope is that we can get that letter out and then start to receive some feedback before the next meeting.
Okay, perfect.
And then if we get stuck, we'll send it, we'll hold it and get feedback from the committee.
Okay.
I just want to go on the record that I think now is not a good time, given that one of the main purposes, as noted by Dorothy, is institutional knowledge, and no one right here now has that institutional knowledge, and coupled with the fact that we are dealing with some complex legal situations right now that they have already dug into, as well as the fact that our union is already well versed with negotiating with them. I just don't think now's the time.
And I have no problem, reaching out to Liz and filling her in on this conversation and where our collective heads are at as far as the exercise that we're undertaking.
Yeah, I think that would be good, Sarah. I mean, we have a good relationship with them, and I think, that that would be a good idea.
I will do that. All right, so any other discussion pieces under that motion before we vote?
I don't think you have a second yet.
I do.
Seconded.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
Quietly.
All right, so roll call. Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron.
Yes.
Sarah Fox.
No.
David Harris.
Yes.
Megan Taylor.
Yes.
All right, so that motion carries 4-1. All right, thanks for your help with that, Dorothy.
Sure.
All right, so that leads us to school committee internal communication. This is something that we kind of go through each year. Dorothy is usually around to help us out on this. So there were a couple of things in our Dropbox. One is our current policies on how we govern, so sort of the operating protocols. And then the next is a draft that John has put together in how he would like to see things move forward, much of which is very similar, if not the same, but I think there's just a little bit more meat to what John has put out from his desk. So I will open this up for conversation. Did everybody get a chance to look, particularly since the one is you know, all our current policies, but particularly John's information over?
Sarah, do you mind if I just set the table a little bit for the newer members about operating protocols?
Please do.
Okay, so you know, it sounds like you're not ready to hear my big spiel in PowerPoint, but particularly when they're new members of the team, which, I mean, obviously you have a couple new school committee members and a new superintendent, so you have a different team that's working together. And it's always a good idea to have a discussion when that turnover happens about how you're going to operate and communicate together. I often think of it as once you've determined how you're going to work together, then you can actually dig in and do the work, because you're not thinking about, you know, how does this work? How do we get things done? You know how you're going to get them done, so you can get them done. So we recommend, as you have done in the past, that you establish a set of operating protocols and have that discussion about how communication flows before the meeting, at the meeting, and between the meeting, so that you can work together effectively and have that same understanding. You have a couple people that have come on not working with the committee in the past. You have John coming on, who is coming from another district, has different experiences, and may make different assumptions about how that operation and communication happens differently than it happens in Marblehead. So even though you have established operating protocols, now's really the time to look at them and say, are they working for us? Do we want to make any changes? And are there areas that the operating protocols may not have been working for us as effectively as we want? So we want to edit or add to those protocols. So that's my setting the table. And Sarah, I'll throw it back to you.
So thanks, Dorothy. So if you want to go ahead and do the presentation, that would be great. Sorry, I didn't mean to kind of veer off course.
Well, and what I'm gonna do really quickly. Let's see if this works.
Yep.
Okay. So let me see if it's working right from my end here. You still see it?
Yes.
Okay. Something in that share did not work the way I expected. So we'll see what happens when I try and forward here. So, oh, it's not going to work. Hang on. Sorry. Okay, I got it. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, so I always start my presentations with just having you think big picture. And if you think about what is the overarching mission of the school committee, what would people say? Just throw out some thoughts.
Well, clearly to hire the new superintendent, or
Okay.
to hire this.
Hire the superintendent, evaluate the superintendent.
I think that you know, to set policy, maintain policy that reflects the values of the district.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to take this right from the MASC, from the School Reform Act. To hire the superintendent, we have some additional responsibilities in regards to the assistant superintendent, special education director, school business officer, and legal counsel. We develop and dictate policy. We set goals and standards for the district, the superintendent, ourselves, and we review the school improvement plans. We set the district budget, and we are the employer of record for collective bargaining.
All right. So a very nice recap. So when we think big picture, think of everything that you talked about fits under that umbrella. According to the National School Boards Association, the overarching mission of any school committee is continuous improvement in student achievement. So student achievement as you define it for the students in Marblehead, not just test scores, but what do you want them to know and be able to do and have accomplished once they cross the stage at graduation. So that's big picture. And all the things that Sarah outlined that others of you talked about fit under that umbrella. Taking those responsibilities seriously and doing them well is the way the district runs effectively in that pursuit of student achievement. So we talk about the school committee and the superintendent together being the governance team that needs to be able to work effectively in that pursuit of what you want for your district goals, and that ultimate goal of continuous improvement in student achievement. And part of that working together is understanding that there's different roles for the superintendent and the committee, that both have a leadership role, this committee from a governance viewpoint and the superintendent from the management viewpoint, managing the day-to-day operations of the district. So the superintendent is going to come to the school committee with recommendations on goals, on policy and budget. School committee deliberates over those recommendations, makes decisions, and hands it back to the superintendent to implement the decisions that the committee has made. So this committee is thinking about those big picture questions of what and why, how much. Superintendent's thinking more, maybe think of it as tactically, how does the work get done? Who does it? When does it happen? Where does it happen? Particularly at goal setting time, and I think Sarah Gold brought this up when I was asking that question, that the school committee is the bridge between the community and the superintendent, bringing the vision and values of the community to the table. Conversely, the superintendent is the bridge between the staff and the committee. So bringing the needs of the staff to get the job done. And those two things come together as you're deliberating and making your decisions at the table. Both sides have the responsibility for promoting trust and mutual respect in that relationship. And when it's all humming along well, then you have the trust of the community too. So there's also a difference between being the committee, which only exists when there's a properly posted meeting, or being an individual member. So outside of a committee meeting, you have no authority unless it's been specifically granted to you by the committee. So you might have liaison responsibilities, subcommittee responsibilities. The chair has additional responsibilities. But other than that, you're really just another man on the street. However, as a member of the body, you certainly have the responsibility to come to meetings prepared, to contribute to and communicate to the discussion, particularly about the vision and goal questions that, or the decisions that are made. Ask those critical questions. I think we all know that the best decisions are made when multiple viewpoints come into play, and those critical questions can be asked. And when those different viewpoints come into play, and sometimes the vote isn't 5-0, then the committee members should support the decision of the committee. That doesn't mean changing your mind, doesn't mean saying, oh yeah, that was right, but it does mean not getting in the way of the decision moving forward. And of course, everybody needs to be dedicated to the work on behalf of students. The committee is exercising its authority through the votes it takes, through the meetings, governing through policy. making sure that having the fiduciary responsibility to make sure the financial resources are used appropriately, engaging the community in the work of the schools, sustaining that relationship, and the employer of record and the collective bargaining. And this slide was already very well articulated. I think it might have been Sarah who went through taking that, what are the responsibilities of the school committee so far as being the municipal legislature for schools going forward, you know, according to law and regulation. So that gets us to thinking about, you know, that sort of setting the table of where the responsibilities lie and how you communicate and make that collaboration happen, gets us to the discussion about operating protocols. You've done them in the past, so you know that they are that set of ground rules that's created and maintained by the committee and periodically revised. Again, enables you to work together. And you can also use that document occasionally for self-evaluation. Are we following our protocols? I mean, in a way, that's what you're doing this morning. You're looking at your protocols and finding out, are they working for you, or do you need to be adjusting them? So I'm gonna stop my share here because I think that probably we're ready to leap into the discussion of the two documents that you have in front of you. Any questions before we leap into that discussion though?
I think that was a good overview, Dorothy. That I like those
my
chart
Venn
visuals.
diagrams.
Yeah, I love a Venn diagram. So, you know, just a good refresher, I think.
So one thing I also found on from the MISC that pertains to this that I think really summarizes our duty the best, it was so well written, is it says, finally, the school committee represents the heart and soul of the community and its conscience, as well as when it comes to public education. Citizens look to the board for guidance and to personify the best qualities of the city, town, or region. The obligation to fulfill these standards is an unwritten but important standard.
That is
So, yeah, excellent. So if you're looking at, I wonder if it makes sense to quickly go through the operating protocols that you have in place right now, and particularly people who have been on the committee, to talk a little bit about, you know, how they work for you and if they're working for you. Would that make sense, Sarah?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Sarah, is there any way you can put that up on your screen?
Hear that.
While she's doing that, I just want to apologize that occasionally I have a little head pop into the screen.
It's a cute little head.
All right, can everybody see that?
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. So, Dorothy, would it be best if I read through this, or is that silly?
No, I think, why don't you, what I'm thinking a little bit is, and I don't think you can do this as a split screen, and John, you're probably most familiar with the document that you expanded on some of these things. I'm wondering if in reading one bullet, if we cross to the other document, I'm just looking at this first bullet, we shall conduct business through a set agenda tied to district goals. I noticed that in John's document, bullet 2 covers the same thing and expands it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I feel as though in John's document that number 1 and number 2 are actually like both kind of expansions on that first bullet.
Yeah, yeah.
So we acknowledge that a school committee meeting is a meeting of the school committee that is held in public, not a public meeting, and we shall conduct business through a set agenda that should be connected to district goals. Emerging items shall be addressed in subsequent meetings. through planned agenda items unless it is determined by the school committee chairperson that it would be detrimental to delay the issue until a subsequent meeting. Requests to add items to an agenda shall be made to the superintendent or the school committee chairperson in accordance with the law.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are a public meeting. We're not a public hearing, which means it's not a free-for-all and people can't talk out of turn and without the discretion of the chair or during public comment.
Absolutely correct.
But by law, we are a public meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think the differentiation here is it's a meeting held in public. That's the public meeting, not a meeting with the public, which would be a public hearing.
Yes. No, that's like the term I was just looking for, was to clarify with that. It's not a public hearing.
Yeah.
So maybe that needs to, if we're thinking about this kind of as a draft with, as we're discussing it today, then to kind of stew on it. This is how I saw this. So we're discussing it today, stewing on it, and then it'll come back for further discussion and a vote, ostensibly at a subsequent meeting. Maybe that's sort of a clarification that needs to be made. So,
you know, also because this would be a policy change, doesn't this need to be read twice in a public meeting before we can vote on it?
So what? I was going to answer the wrong question, so I'll be quiet.
So that, yeah, I think it does. Because if it's a policy, if it is a policy change, because these are our operating protocols, then yes.
So we often talk about protocols as not being coded into policy because you want it to be a flexible enough document that can change fairly easily. Not to say, you know, don't follow the procedure of making sure that you deliberate, you know, that you have enough time to think about it before you vote. And you also don't want to vote at a workshop. Generally, there's no votes taken there other than what is expected on the agenda. So we talk about it as being not like buried in your policy manual, but a little more front and center. And also being something that's a little bit more flexible than you think about policy with multiple readings and so forth, so that it can change as committee members change or as you see a need to tweak and change the document. We also talk about it being not getting so long and like a big rule book that it becomes sort of burdensome to try and follow, but to put those important things out there succinctly so that you can keep it front of mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I think also we did work through these over the years, I believe, and make some edits.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, to David's point, I think that if I recall, these were worked on for about 2 years by the policy committee with conjunction with MASC. And I wonder if there's an area of our current operating protocols that isn't working for someone, if maybe we just talk about that area, because personally, yeah. I think that they've been working well.
I would agree. I mean, I think, Sarah, was that the expectation? It's just, you know, we're reviewing it for purposes of the committee, and Dorothy is you know, helping lead us through this discussion. But I'm open to suggestions for people that might want to, you know, smooth them over or make some recommended changes. But I'm good with how we govern. I think they have served us well, and maybe we don't need to make any changes.
I am gonna push back a little bit on that one. Okay. I think, as Dorothy said, we are a new team at this point. So we've got a new administration for the most part. We've got new members on our committee. And I do think this is a point where we should be not necessarily changing whole scale, but tightening up how we work, especially because we've kind of had to be a lot more unstructured over the past 18 months. And now we have the ability to put that structure back in place so that we're working as effectively and efficiently as possible. So I think for that reason, it's worthwhile, again, tightening up what we've got, not changing whole scale, but just kind of clarifying where it makes sense. And I think what this piece that John's kind of put in draft form does a good job of that. I would suggest maybe we don't necessarily, I mean, it's up to you guys if we want to go through every one, but I think, you know, John's kind of in charge from an operational standpoint. And I think it's worthwhile, like I said, just making sure that we've got the structure in place to make sure we're really being effective and efficient with everybody's time, our time, John's time, the administration, the town. And we've got that, you know, structured communication lines in place too.
Yeah, I would say, I think I remember talking to you guys last summer and saying, you know, given what you had been going through, it seemed like there were times when you felt the need to sort of step a little bit out of your school committee role into more of an administrative role. And now with a solid administration and a path forward in place, you want to make sure that you step fully back into that school committee role. And anything that you felt the need to reasonably step into, that you step out of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And that's my thinking on this as well, is sort of that, and as well as Megan's, is that, you know, we do have someone new who is permanent, and that we want to establish a really tight protocol for how our relationships and are built with John and the administration. And yeah, so I think it isn't my intention at all to kind of throw out this other document, but possibly just to, like Megan said, kind of tighten it up and possibly expand on a few little pieces.
And I think you also want to make sure that new members, Emily, I just saw you waving your hand. I think you want to make sure that new members understand and have a chance to say, you know, what does this mean? And how does it get applied?
Go ahead.
Well, that's what I was just going to say, is that I, you know, looked over both of these documents, and the newer one with the questions that I had, you know, this last week, I was like, oh, this is how this works. And as a new person, to have this laid out so nicely and developed, that I was able to get my questions answered by, like, how, you know, because being new, how does, like, if someone talks to me, who do I talk to, just so I know exactly the order of, under the communication, what the school committee's role is. So I thought this was great. And I think the more developed one is better, has more information and is in more detail and can help us really understand what our roles should be. So this is the new guy.
And I had a similar appreciation, even though I've, you know, got a couple of years under my belt at this point. It was helpful for me reading through these to sort of think, oh yes, that hashes that piece out, that kind of more broad bullet point, and kind of, you know, delineates it a little bit more precisely. And that was helpful to me.
One concern I have about the new document, to be perfectly honest, is I felt it usurped some of the provisions in the Educational Reform Act. And also, I personally felt that it took the process away from the public, in that there was, you know, one line about no questions that wouldn't be answered in a public meeting that were not, and I'm paraphrasing, that were not sent ahead of time. The purpose of a public body is that public business happens in public. And if we're kind of coming to these meetings with predetermined statements, that removes the public from having a role in this and seeing kind of how the sausage is made, which is their right. I don't believe in anybody that should ever have a gotcha moment. I don't think that should ever be anybody's goal, but I do think that if through the discussion, I do think that through the public process, we should be able to ask questions that we may not have thought about several days in advance or whatever. I just don't want to, I have concerns.
Sarah, what specific bullet were you looking at? Do you know off the top of your head there? I know you're managing a couple things there.
If we can, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. We're having a mental breakdown.
So I'm just looking for that as well.
If we could project the document on the screen, it would probably be helpful. And we can go through the issues.
It looks like they'll be coming up on the screen in a minute.
Okay. Is that too big?
Perfect.
No, I was just gonna ask you to make it bigger with my old eyes here. So, thanks.
So tell me.
I felt that new business kind of was somewhat felt removed from this, the idea of having new business on an agenda.
So Sarah, which one is that? Just so we can all look at it.
It wasn't that it was specifically outlined, it was that emerging items shall be addressed in subsequent meetings. I like the way we have new business now. It works well as things unfold rapidly.
So I'm going to push back a little bit on that, or maybe you can give me a little bit more local context, because that's not an uncommon bullet to have, and it's also sometimes an open meeting law issue. If you have an issue that's not on the agenda and you begin to discuss it, that can be a violation of the open meeting law because you have not advised the public that you're going to discuss that.
I totally understand that. New business pertains to anything that could not have been foreseen 48 hours of advance.
My reading of number 2 was actually how we do it right now.
Okay, as long as there's no change. I saw that provision for new business, things that cannot be foreseen with 48 hours in advance, would be removed.
No, that's not how I read that at all. That emerging items, that at any point, there's always something that's sort of like, oh yeah, that didn't make it onto this agenda. We'll put that on for the subsequent agenda. But then there are those every once in a while times where it says, oh yeah, we actually need to deal with that, and so that needs to be brought up in new business.
Yeah, and I think some of that is making sure that when a topic comes up, that the administration has enough time to prepare to discuss it, that they, if there's background that they need to be able to have a good discussion, that they're able to gather that and make that presentation to you.
Totally agree. And just for context, never in the last year was there ever a time that I think any of us, approached Bill McAuliffe with a gotcha moment, if you know what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
But there were certainly times where things happened where it had to come up under new business for whatever reason. They're limited in scope, but they do exist.
Yeah, and there were certainly times that Bill would bring something to me, a day before the meeting and say, this came in and I want to mention it under new business. And it was never something earth-shattering.
Yeah.
Right. That is covered here, right? Because it says, unless the chairperson decides it would be detrimental to delay. Right?
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, I just lost that train of thought. That's what it was. I actually have heard a lot of feedback at various times that people are actually looking for more clarity in our agenda items, more specificness of, what we're doing. Because often you'll read our agenda sometimes and I feel like it's in code a little bit for those of us in the know. And if you have the backup in our packet of what document we might be talking about, it's a little clearer. But sometimes to the public, some of these very high level ideas, and we do have to keep it high level to a certain extent, but I think that if we could have some clarity, it would be helpful.
Okay.
And while I agree with 4 wholeheartedly, I feel like writing it like that kind of diminishes all of our professionalism that we would need to be told to vote non-personalities.
Well, I think we need, you know, as Dorothy said, that this is a flexible document, and so it can change. And you know, on every one of the summer retreats that I've participated in, we've had a conversation around internal communication and policies and protocols and everything, or operating protocols. But I think that I actually like keeping that in there, because although, you know, no one on this current committee may struggle with that, you know, we don't know, you know, 3 committees into the future what may be happening, and that I think it's a good one to keep on there.
But as Dorothy noted, this is something that each new committee should review themselves. So I think we are designing this for this committee. And if people feel that each other are voting that way, that's okay. But I personally have respect that all of you are voting based on the decision and not on personalities or alliances.
So I'm not a fan, I'm just going to say this, of group wordsmithing. But I do wonder if maybe personalities isn't quite the word. And I think that there's also something in here about not voting on bias, or there's another,
so
maybe something else that covers this.
On the current policy that we have, or the protocols that we have, it says school committee members will engage in open-minded, respectful debate, vote our convictions, avoid bias, and will support the decisions of the majority of the committee. So maybe
I think that's perfect.
Just continue to use that. John, feel free to pipe in at any point, because you know, you're as much of a part of this as we are.
So to avoid either credit or blame, I will share kind of how this came to be. I reached out to Bill and asked, is there a protocol for communication? Is there a process document? And he shared that that had been a conversation, and that was one of those gotta get tos, that in the midst of everything that was happening, they didn't get to. So I asked him, do you have an example of something? And so Bill sent me something from Triton, from Beverly, and from Acton Boxborough. And I did kind of a compilation of all 3 documents. And to be honest, I wasn't aware we had an internal document. So maybe shame on me. But in the conversation with Bill, it wasn't referenced. And so yeah, I might have been able to use it to augment. So I am not married to this document that I put forward. I produced it in an erroneous belief that one didn't exist. And so if what exists, you want to change, modify, edit, I'm happy to be part of that process. But what I produced for the committee was in thinking that we needed to establish such a document.
Gotcha.
And thank you, Jen. This is not at all, you know, poking at anybody. We're just working through. You have done a tremendous amount of work in your first 3 weeks, and I don't think anybody is short of impressed.
Thank you. Everybody keeps talking about this new superintendent. I can't wait to meet him.
I was actually at another district that had hired their, I think you guys completed your hiring process prior to everything shutting down, correct?
Yes.
Another district that hired their superintendent ended up doing some of the last interviews remotely. And then when everyone was at an event masked, with face masks on, so the chair went up to someone and asked if they were a town official, and they said, no, actually, I'm your new superintendent. So There you go.
Glad we avoided that.
So, well,
Yeah.
I would like to just say, I think, once again, thanks for the work here and always trying to improve upon this. So there's the old protocols, and maybe it's great that John wasn't influenced by those, or but they do line up, and then there's some additional clarity. And I would also agree with Dorothy that I think, protocol versus, a set policy and, numbers of readings and so on and so forth. But I think it's probably, we're not going to vote on this, and there's an opportunity for, the rest of us to look through this and identify any specific items that we might like to talk about at our next meeting, and then maybe come to agreement.
Yeah, I think.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Given that, particularly given John's confession, I guess, that he didn't know that the protocols, the ones existed, I wonder if it makes sense for a couple of you who might volunteer to take what you have, take what John did, figure out where you want to expand on some of the bullets with the new information that John put forward, and then come back to the committee with a draft document. And that sounds like it might be the efficient way to do things, rather than trying to wordsmith this as a group of a large number of people.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
That's a brilliant idea. I would love to be part of that group.
Okay, good to know. And I think that definitely makes sense offline to do that, bring it back, because I think, obviously we sort of moved things around as far as what you were presenting today, Dorothy. And so we still have some communication pieces to discuss. So I think this easily fits along with other ongoing conversations that will come up on agendas in the future of during this summer. So I think that makes perfect sense that we've got it out there. We can all, we've got a little discussion behind it. We can all ruminate on it, and then a few of us can meet and kind of combine the documents and bring them forth to the committee at a later date.
Sarah, is the intent though that we would kind of be able to wrap this up this summer?
Yeah, that would be my intent.
That would be the goal.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, again, since we've seen both and had, I think, a decent conversation about both, obviously we didn't get all the way through, but I think, we can do that and offline, that we can absolutely move to do that.
So again, I'm sorry if I'm not like catching it. I'm sorry, but would the intent be that at our next meeting, whoever is working on it will have sent it to the committee, and we can, voice any concerns and then vote?
My intent would be that, assuming, because in my head, the next meeting I think we've got set for the 10th, that has that larger communication of public communication as well, and just kind of really trying to move us forward in the right directions, that when that occurs, when that conversation occurs, this comes back. So in my head, that is occurring on the 10th. And so as long as it stays there, then yes, this stays there. And I guess, we can have a conversation too, if so for whatever reason that larger conversation has to be pushed off, that since we've seen this already, we can keep it on that agenda.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that? All right, I hear nothing, so we will move forward. All right, Dorothy, thank you so much. Because I think that brings us to the end of what we had asked you to help us out with today.
All right.
Yeah, and feel free to stick around, but we understand that you are also very busy, so feel no need to stick around as well.
Okay.
We do always appreciate your input.
Very much so.
Well, I enjoy working with you, and anytime I can provide some input and value, I am more than happy to do that.
Well, I think we've already got you set up for the next meeting as well, and my guess is that we may need you at least one other time.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Dorothy.
Okay, I will see you on the 10th.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Dorothy.
Okay,
Thank you.
All
goodbye.
right. Going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, and then that will move us on to the much awaited superintendent report on reentry planning and the update on that.
So thank you. And I think I would be remiss not to lead with, there is no one more than I that wants to open all of our schools and invite all of our children back to be in classrooms, in front of teachers, on the athletic fields, in the chorus room, playing in the band. What the work put forward in front of us by the commissioner is, how can you do that safely? And so we have been working feverishly, I think would be a good word, over the last several weeks in the committee structure, which I think is serving us well, looking at what does fully in-person look like, what does a hybrid model look like, and what does fully remote look like. We have been keeping the public abreast of all of the work that we're doing. The backtogethermhd.com website. Kate Thompson has been a godsend to a new superintendent. She is updating and posting documents and coming in with her iPhone and doing the video snippets and uploading those to the website. So I don't think that anyone could suggest that we're not being very transparent in our work. I will say I do not see a path for us to return to all in-person instruction. The department and the commissioner issue update and guidance documents every other day. There's another call with the commissioner tomorrow. So a new document of 15 pages about COVID responses. What do you do with transportation? How does this impact food service? And so as we get that information, it looks less and less likely that we could bring everyone back safely in person and maintain the 6-foot distance. The principals have done an incredible amount of work measuring buildings, looking at capacity, repurposing spaces, and yes, we could bring people back with the 3-foot distancing, but the Board of Health, that's not their recommendation, and the more that we learn, it doesn't seem the safest alternative. So the 6-foot distancing is really what we're using as our benchmark, which all but eliminates the possibility of returning everyone to in-person instruction. We will be posting all of what I'm talking about today, later this afternoon, the memo that the school committee got to the backtogethermhd.com website. And then I'm going to go on what I'm calling listening tours. I'll have a staff session tomorrow from 1 to 2, parent and family session 6 to 7, and then 2 more sessions on Thursday. And again, we'll post all of that information. And so you guys have the data and the statistics about in-person and hybrid. While approximately 2/3 of our families would like to go back in person, our staff are not at that place. And so a hybrid model, I think, really makes the most sense. And Nan Murphy, who is a blessing to me every day, has done an incredible amount of work with the teaching and learning committees, the pre-K to 6, the 7 to 12, and they have come up with really creative ways to cohort students to get them back into classrooms safely. And so what I provided you was schedules for the pre-K to 6 model. And when we talked about bringing people back in hybrid models, there was no real clear winner with 45% of families saying, let's go every other week. 48% saying let's do the every other day, 41% saying what about a morning and an afternoon. And in Nan's brilliance and work, she was able to get a variety of each of those approaches for returning students in the cohort model to in-person instruction. So for the pre-K to 6 model, students will be in a cohort on a 2-week rotating schedule, so that over the course of 10 academic days, they will have been in front of their teacher 5 times for approximately 4 hours each. And then when students are not in the face-to-face instruction, they are in a remote learning, but each school will have a remote learning liaison. Each cohort will have a professional that will interface with the students in remote learning. They are really breaking down those schedules to make sure that the lessons we learned from last spring, or what didn't work in remote learning, are addressed for families in a specific schedule, set times, attendance requirements, grading. So many of those pieces that were missing elements and really a source of frustration for our families are captured in the hybrid model. And then you have the middle school hybrid model, where students are either in a morning session or an afternoon session. And so those students are coming in for approximately 2.5 hours each day, either in a morning cohort or an afternoon cohort. The high school similarly has a cohort A and a cohort B that meet in a morning or an afternoon session. As I roll this out, I want to caution people that this cannot be a zero-sum game. It's all or nothing. Because I know people that want to go totally in person and people that have to stay totally remote feel passionately about those. And this is where I think the hybrid model, which I will concede initially was the most confusing to me. I was like, I don't see how that will work. And Nan and her committees have just done great work and compromise, because nobody on the committees said, no, it has to be this way. People came to the table with passionate feelings and ideas, but then as educators spoke, parents were like, oh, we didn't think about that, makes sense. Parents added something, educators were like, oh, that's a piece we might not have considered. And so Nan and her work with the Teaching and Learning Committee, they're not meeting once a week for an hour. They're meeting regularly for extended period of times. So as we're rolling this out, she already has both groups at the ready. So as questions are posed today and we're listening to community input, if we have to pivot and make some adjustments, she's ready to do that work. I think I'll pause there and open it up for questions. That we can't return to 100% in-person instruction. I think that it is highly likely that we will have to go remote at some point or points in the coming year. And the work that Teaching and Learning has done to establish these schedules makes that pivot so much easier. There's a structure, there's a process, there's systems, so that if there is the need to close down a school or close the schools, we can pivot to that remote learning model given this infrastructure.
Thanks, John.
Sarah,
Yes.
can I just ask John to clarify that last statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that all right? Because John, I guess what I'm trying to understand is I can see it in the pre-K to 6 because there's remote learning happening during that day anyway through the hybrid models, but can you talk about that transition from a hybrid to remote for both vets and the high school?
Yep. The Teaching and Learning Committees are working on, I think Sarah Fox said this earlier, the sausage being made on that, but the structure of the timing that kids could be, they know that they're either going to be face-to-face or in remote in that 2.5 hour block. So they're putting structures in place that if it has to be all remote, students would know that they are responsible during those times.
So it's more the schedule piece of it. So
Yes.
technically when they're in person, you know, for the high school, the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, then that would just be, they'd be virtually, but at those same times for those same classes. Okay.
I believe that to be true, and I would ask Nan to jump in if I've missed that.
That is the plan. There is talk about, you know, teachers wanting to maybe extend some of that to broaden a topic or something, but that would all be planned within the cohort of the teaching team so that the content is equitable. So ultimately the answer to your question is yes, that schedule would remain the same.
Okay, thank you.
So I've had the honor of getting to send the pre-K through 6 opening committee, and I just want to let my fellow committee members here know how impressed I have been with the entire process. And as you all know, I have a high bar, so I have felt it has been so collaborative, and every piece of the team was worked together. And also, I feel that all of our stakeholders are represented. There's people from every mindset, and it's always been respectful, but it's also been very honest. So teachers have been really honest about what their hurdles were last spring, because they existed for teachers and parents and students. And parents have been really honest about the hurdles on our side. And it's really been this idea of, let's identify what didn't work so we can get to what works best. And it's been a really great process. And we've all acknowledged there's no perfect solution, because the perfect solution would be that every child is in a school safely. And due to circumstances beyond anyone's control, as John said, that's just not possible. So I truly believe we're getting to the best non-perfect solution, if you will. And I felt really good about the process.
Sarah,
and there's been a lot of process, a lot.
Thank you very much for saying that. And I was remiss in talking about the in-person, because I know that people feel very strongly about that. In the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable, they put out a survey, and not one of the 19 school districts responding were talking about a fully in-person model. It just is not feasible. So most are looking at the hybrid, and there was just information out of one of our neighbors today that they're pushing to open fully remote. And so people continue to be all over the spectrum. What I'm very proud about, the work we have done here, is the compromise, is getting students back into buildings in front of teachers, attending to the academic and social emotional needs without jeopardizing that safety piece, which I think is paramount.
David, I know you've got a work meeting that you have to hop off for in a few. Do you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to weigh in on before you have to hop off? Hopefully you'll be back, but I don't know where we'll be at on the agenda at that point.
Right. No, I mean, just so since we're hearing this now, just a summary of while things could evolve and continue to change, what would the next steps be, John? Is something?
Yeah, we're doing a staff listening session tomorrow for them to give feedback on the hybrid model. And then we're opening it up to community to ask questions. If we need to, we will make revisions. And then on Friday, the department wants every school district to have submitted they're very purposeful in their language, draft preliminary school reopening plans.
Right.
We will then have 10 days. We'll put out another survey to constituents that will be much more pointed in terms of what will you elect to do? Will you be coming back in the hybrid model, or will you stay in remote learning? We'll make modifications again, and then the commissioner has an August 10th date where schools have to submit a final schools reopening plan. If history of the last 2 weeks is any guide, and there's a call with the commissioner tomorrow, I anticipate DESE sending a lot more guidance and a lot more information, particularly once they get the preliminary draft plans from every district. I think that's going to be very telling to the department, and they might be able to step in and be more directed in their approach.
One thing before you lose David, because David always has a really good vision on the financial aspect of things as it pertains to this. And I've voiced this concern before, where we will be in this hybrid, more of a half-day model. I just want us to be brainstorming about some of our revolving accounts, like kindergarten tuition, and how budgetary-wise we'll manage things. So David's always a good mind on that. So I wanted to put that out there before we lost him.
So, and there is a document, I think it was added really late, and Michelle, that's one of the reasons that we sort of took the agenda out of order so that Michelle could come be here with us. She was on another call. So, you know, again, I don't know if David will be on at that point, but certainly after the fact can ask any further questions. And I think that, I know in the memo, Michelle speaks to that. So we can absolutely have her sort of, you know, give us a little bit more in-depth information on that type of thing as that comes up in a little while.
And then I see a lot of people doing questions. One thing we did do is we came up with people's likely questions that we were going to give to John. And I will try to add all these on there so that when he does his listening tour, that you have them. I just have to figure out a way to copy that from that piece and add it. But a lot of them actually were ones we came up with as a group, Nan, I think.
That chat saves as the recording saves and everything after this. I believe that chat saves. So I will do my best. I've not been very successful in sort of being able to navigate through the recordings and everything, but I will do my best to get that to you. Yeah, David. And
you can also drag and copy the chat right before you exit the meeting and cut and paste it onto a Word document.
That's a really good idea. Yeah. So Sarah, I won't end the meeting until we've been able to do that.
So Sarah Gold, in terms of the conversation now, do you want us to just jump into our own questions, or is it worthwhile John and Nan walking through each model? How do you want to proceed here?
I think John, this is my opinion, I think John sort of gave that higher level. It's going to be posted after this so that the community has a chance to really process through it and then come to the listening things tomorrow and Thursday, as well as, you know, is it reentry at marbleheadschools.com? John, is that still the email address?
Yes.
Okay, so that, you know, those questions can be submitted as well. So I think at this point, we can ask questions.
So one policy question I've had is, because so much of this is just, is not something for us to get into the nitty gritty other than as parents. One policy question is, when we talk about the possibility with remote learning, particularly where some families will choose that from the beginning, I think the idea is if we become all remote, that will be different than if families choose from the get-go that they're all remote. Where we have some staff, I forgot the percentage, I think John put it in the memo, something like 50, was it 54%, something like that, of staff that was kind of preferring it. And then we have some families that prefer to be remote for various reasons. Will we be, as a policy in Marblehead, requesting that there be a remote plan that our students here are taught by, like in a cohort of Marblehead students with a Marblehead teacher, taught with a curriculum designed by you know, a Marblehead educator? Or are we going to look at the policy of enrolling in one of these potential rollouts in the state?
I think the quick answer to that is to be determined, because the state still has yet to come out with what options would be available to districts with any specificity. There is an option that they call playlist, which resonates with me because there might be course specific, and as a secondary person, high school person, that if you don't have a local educator or you don't have the local capacity for a course like that, for a student to say, okay, I'm going to do remote learning AP Physics, or I'm going to do remote learning civics. But I agree with you, Sarah Fox, that there are going to be a number of Marblehead educators that will be in a remote learning model, so we can cohort those students to have a Marblehead educator or professional as a point person. Now, the state system might be robust, and some families might look at it and say, that's great, we'll elect that, but there would still be a local Marblehead educator or professional as a point of contact.
John, just to piggyback on that, so if a family chooses to be fully remote from the get-go, and then as a district, though, we are in some type of in-person. I agree with you on the when, because I also think it's a when, not an if, we end up in fully remote, much to my cringe. But those families, and I think this does depend on whether the state ends up and whether we end up buying into a state program, but the families that are fully remote from the get-go, do they have an ability when the district transitions into fully remote to rejoin on that level, or is that still kind of in the works, or?
It's a great question, and one that Nan and I were working together this morning. I really want to promote the idea of voice and choice. I don't want a family to feel like they're locked into a system, but then I want to make sure that we're not, we're taking educators and professionals into account that, okay, you had a cohort of 8 and now your cohort is 16. So how we group students, what the cohorts look like, that is another positive for the hybrid model that might be missed, is class size in the face-to-face instruction piece is going to be around 10. And so the elementary piece is focusing on numeracy and literacy in the time that they're in session. And then in those remote days, they will be focusing on other content areas, but really focused instruction on literacy and numeracy in those face-to-face sessions. And if I'm all over the map, I apologize, but there are so many moving parts and pieces that I remember something, and I think you guys need to hear that. So thank you for your indulgence.
No, that's a great point, John. We made it a lot in those teaching and learning committees, is what a teacher can do with 23 students versus what a teacher can do with 8, 9, 10, light years apart. We talk about how important small group learning is. Well, those chunks of time really are going to be small group learning. And it's going to be really exciting to see what can be accomplished during that time. And I think that it will be much more impactful because, listen, I'm managing 5 kids every day. It's a lot different than managing 2. So there's that. But I do feel that that's a really good point you made about how someone might want to take AP Physics and we might not have an AP Physics remote teacher. So we'll definitely have to work within those constraints. But for instance, if we have the availability to do a remote cohort of, 6th grade with a 6th grade teacher and her use her typical curriculum, I would, as much as possible, like to facilitate that model. I think there's a tremendous pride in Marblehead about our educators in what they do. And also, I think it will be very helpful for those students that are remote to kind of still maintain that social emotional connection to each other, to their friends. It can be very isolating for these children, I think. And so I think to still have a class of students and a teacher that they know and love, and particular projects, because I know, for instance, we do a lot of Marblehead specific projects that work with the state frameworks, but it's a sense of community and home at elementary levels that I think that would be a really great way to still connect those students.
That's part of the elementary model that I like, is that every day begins with that engagement piece. Whether you're in the hybrid model or whether you're fully remote, you are part of that morning time.
Megan, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, Nan, I mean, you and I talked about this briefly yesterday, but just, you know, I'm trying to wrap my head around the model. So if we can just talk about the pre-K to 6 model in a little bit greater detail, I would appreciate that. One thing that kind of jumped out at me was the number of hours of in-person teaching versus total hours, because I get that they're getting both during, during their cohorts. But, if you can kind of talk through the rationale behind that, and again, go through some of the other models that you looked at in detail as well, and the challenges that kind of led you to where you ended up.
Sure. So we started out by just kind of I screenshotted some models that were being kind of shared around Massachusetts as potential hybrid models, just to kind of prime the pump when we started this work a few weeks ago. And what ended up evolving is completely unique and personalized to Marblehead Public Schools. It is not something that we grabbed off somebody else's website and ran with. It truly has been built from the ground up based on what the committee felt was best for kids. So to talk you through the structure of the day, as John said, it's a 2-week model. So on week 1, if you are in cohort A, you are in front of your teacher 3 times a week. You come to school and you get direct instruction around literacy and mathematics from your classroom teacher. You will leave school at 11:50. And there will be a remote component of follow-up connected tasks. So the language we've used is remote learning extensions. So there will be traditional homework or some sort of component that will help you for continue the learning for that time. The remote students are in school the same block of time from 8 to 11:50. The learning for them will consist of logging on for morning meeting at 8 o'clock. And when morning meeting concludes, they will then be guided by a professional that is in that session with them. So at that point, whether it's a paraprofessional or a tutor, that structured remote learning will be framed by that person. An agenda maybe will be presented to children. There'll be a fluid, a structured flow to the day or to the time that they're using. Whether it focuses, what content it focuses on will be science and social studies, small group clarification, follow up in some cases on literacy and math, but it will be supported by a point adult during that time. They too will have extension activities to complete independently. And then the next day, cohort B will be in front of their teacher for literacy and math instruction from 8 to 11:50. Their cohort A friends will log on at 8 o'clock, join them for morning meeting, and then follow the same remote schedule as their peers did the day before. Does that help frame it a little bit for you, Megan? I can't hear you. Got it.
forgot I put it on mute. So that's a good walkthrough, and I appreciate that. But can you also talk about, you know, again, why you landed there versus some of the other models that maybe you talked about? Like, what are really the strengths here to make this work versus, you know, some of the other ones you may have gone
so
through?
Teachers were very adamant. They wanted to see kids every day. They really did not want one day where they didn't see kids. They didn't want kids to not be in front of a teacher more than 3 days. They felt a 4-day rotation was too long to not be seen by a teacher. The concentration on literacy and math was another driving factor. They wanted in-person, the in-person instruction to consist of those foundational skills. So that was another priority put forward by our teaching staff. And I think it was echoed by our parental partners as well in the conversation. The morning meeting was established to be part of a consistent piece of the schedule starting at 8 o'clock to bring both cohorts together and to provide the structure for students, whether you were remote or in person. Your school day consists of the hours 8 to 11:50. And so we felt that would support families and students in developing sleep routines and consistency throughout their learning environment so that they knew when and who and where to be when they were remote, and where and when and who when they were going to be in person.
Okay, so the consistency piece, I think, is one of the things I mentioned with you, especially in terms of the schedule. So having the 3 days on and then the 2 days on the next week, especially for a younger set of children. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to understand, like that piece. And then also, in terms of seeing them every day, if you look at specifically the schedule for, the vet school where there's morning and afternoon cohorts. Mm-hmm. So, I'm trying to wrap my head around why this schedule is very different from the others and the benefits that we're going to get out of it compared to those. So again, I'm not saying that necessarily the vet schedule would work for the younger kids, but again, that's still got them in every day. It's got consistency for the children. It's got consistency for the parents. They're getting in-person instruction every single day. So that's the piece I'm trying to really wrap my head around.
So I think jump in with a piece here. One of the considerations, Megan, is our secondary students have a larger capacity to get to and from school themselves, where our busing is more for our elementary set, and to do a pickup and a drop off and to clean a bus to go for a pickup. We weren't sure the routes for that or if we had the capacity to do that.
There was definitely a facilities piece too. I sat on the facilities committee and we asked Todd his piece, and he fed that information to Nan. So even though there's all these subcommittees, they're all very collaborative at the administration level. It's been my understanding and my experience from what I've seen. But Todd had explained that at the elementary level, the idea of sanitizing and flipping a building in that short period of time, when younger children tend to touch things more often, was not going to be able to happen. And he also couldn't flip a bus and sanitize it that quickly. So it had to do with maximizing safety.
Emily, did you want to say something?
I'm just looking at the schedule, and are you gonna communicate with parents every Monday and remind them what group your child is in? Because I just see people are gonna start showing up on the wrong days after, at least at the beginning. And then are families gonna be in the same cohort? Like if you have second grader and a fourth grader, will they be A, so they're on the same schedule? I feel like everyone's kind of, there's so much going on that.
If you're a Monday, Wednesday, you're always Monday, Wednesday. Like if you're Monday, Wednesday.
Doesn't it change like the next week?
So Friday's the only flip day. You go every other Friday. But if you're Monday, Wednesday, you're always Monday, Wednesday. If you're Thursday,
okay.
you're always Tuesday, Thursday. And then so you just have to think of like, I go every other Friday.
Oh, but that's not what this says. This says week 1A is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Week 2, you're Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah, we ended up going away from that, Sarah, because of the teachers feeling strongly about the 4 days in between a cohort.
Oh, I didn't remember that switch. I thought because of childcare, we were trying to keep it the same.
Yeah, we did. We've had so many conversations. It's hard to keep them all in alignment, but yeah.
John?
To your point, that is why I think the commissioner has worked with the Massachusetts Teachers Association to provide those 10 days at the beginning of school for staff professional development and communicating clearly with families what cohort you're going to be in, how to get information on safely entering the school and policies and practices and all of that. So I think we will be over communicating with people, and that is work that the committees are doing as well to keep cohort families together. So if you do have a 4th grader, a 7th grader, and an 11th grader, that they're on a similar cohort.
So I think one of the biggest concerns for me on the little kids, as a working parent, and particularly one who pieces together a bunch of different jobs, I think the piece where no week is the same, and so 1 week I would have to have one schedule, and the next week I'd have to have a different schedule, is tough. It's just really tough. And I know, I know that this speaks to this larger conversation, this societal conversation around the fact that school is used as daycare. But I'm even thinking about the ability, to pull in my sitter, and that would be flexing and moving, that it would make it so that my sitter has to be responsible for some reasonably heavy duty educational pieces. And yeah, I don't want to do any gotchas or anything like that. That's just kind of where my head goes on this.
No, and I think that's why we're rolling this out and taking feedback. That there is not a perfect model.
Right.
And in Marblehead, the model that we have put forward, people want us to reconsider or reimagine. We certainly have the ability to do that. The committees are continuing to work. They didn't disband today with today's announcement. And so we're happy to look at them. Today is more about the reality that we cannot safely bring 100% of our students back to in-person instruction. And we are not going fully remote at this point, which some districts are announcing. So if the hybrid, and again, it will resonate with some that are hearing this, that, okay, I can wrap my mind around the 2-week schedule that they're going to be in session these days. And for others, their job, their family situation just doesn't make that possible. So that's why I want to give school committee the opportunity to weigh in before this draft preliminary submission on Friday. Megan?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Megan, can I just say one more thing on that? And I totally agree. I have spent the last few weeks in my own professional capacity, sort of, trying to diplomatically say, that, similar to what Sarah said, this whole situation stinks. And so there's no non-stinky way to handle any of this. And so we're being tasked with creating the options that stink the least, and then each family is going to have to pick which of those least stinky options stinks the least for them. So that totally is where my head is at on all of this. And I'm fully supportive of that idea that, you know, until COVID is no longer, you know, here is our reality, and that we're all best to really wrap our heads around that piece so that we can productively move forward.
So I think a couple things. First of all, these committees they have changed and morphed and heard different points of view, and then reconvened and switched around. That's kind of why I was confused and missed that change. But I do think that, you know, what John said, John's doing a listening tour. I think that we purposely came back and added an additional 2 meetings so that this week, so that we can regroup with the information from the listening tours. So I don't think anybody is saying that any of this is final, and all this feedback is excellent feedback. And I agree completely with you, Sarah, that this is really hard for working families to secure childcare and to schedule life, if you will. But one thing I want to point out is how amazing the communication has been so far. John and Kate Thompson have been really phenomenal. One thing I would request is when you talked about kind of figuring out those cohorts during that 10 days, that if we could get communication out to parents as soon as humanly possible about what cohort their children will be in, I think that, you know, there's limited spots for childcare right now. There's much fewer people willing to kind of go into other people's homes, or there's fewer spots at daycares. It's just limited. So I think the sooner people can kind of figure out what they're doing, the better. So if we just keep this momentum with our communication, I think that will be the important piece.
Megan, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, sorry. So John, I appreciate you kind of framing it in terms of setting our expectations and laying out the work that's been done. And I have no doubt that everybody has worked, like you said, feverishly. And it's an impossible situation, really. There's no great answer. I am very interested to understand the feedback from both staff and the community members. So I'm happy that you're doing those listening tours, and, if I can listen in where possible, I absolutely will, because I think that's an important piece to this process. I do just want to follow up, and again, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I want to make sure that we have the information too. But Nan and Sarah, you mentioned challenges, if you will, around the busing and the facility turnaround. So that's the piece I would like to get more information on, not necessarily today or tomorrow, but, as we kind of work through these plans. If the busing is an issue, I guess I don't have the data to make any type of opinion on the number of students that are bused, how many buses do we have, how would we lay that out in a safe fashion, and if there's a gap, what is that gap and what's it going to cost us? So I would like to have more information on that. And also in terms of facilities, we absolutely have challenges there, especially in our older buildings and especially for our younger students, Coffin being a perfect example. But again, if we're saying that that's a challenge, how are we looking creatively and out of the box to use spaces that are not necessarily purely classroom spaces? And is there an opportunity to be utilizing those creatively and effectively? And again, I'm not saying it hasn't been talked about, but if I could get some clarification on that, I would appreciate it. And it doesn't have to be here at all, because I'm asking for it on the spot. But, if as we work through this process, I could get a better understanding, I would appreciate it.
That stuff came up. Those questions came up. Questions of tents. I mean, when I say, we tried to skin a cat 27 different ways, we tried to skin a cat 27 different ways. Nan facilitated a phenomenal discussion. And one of the pieces is, and Megan, you'll probably appreciate this more than a lot of people from the budget standpoint, is we can take half those students and maybe put them in a tent or the library or this and spread them out. We would have to double our staff, because we still need to keep that ratio 8 to 10 to 1 to get that spacing. So where's the money coming? Because our number one, 90% of our driver is staff budget. staff our salaries. So if we're going to add classes of children, we need to add staff.
Well, one of the reasons I'm asking the question, Sarah, is because it was in response to my question of why can't we have, and again, I'm sure this has been looked at, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it now, is, if we compare it to the other models for the upper grades, this model for the younger kids, pre-K through 6, does not have them in person 5 days a week. So if we looked at it, having them 5 days a week, similar to vets, morning and then afternoon, the response was facilities couldn't handle it. So my question is there a way, so that we're not having to clean down every classroom in between those two cohorts, especially in a school like Coffin, could we basically set up 2 classrooms so that you're not having to go through and clean in between them? So could you use the, some of the rooms that are used for special education classes that might not be in this model, the cafeteria, whatever other spaces we have available so that you're not having to do that cleaning in between?
So having done the walkthrough for the facilities audit in the spring, at our elementary levels, every single space is used. I mean, Sean's literally in a closet because he gave his office to be used for another purpose. People are in what were designed as copy rooms and storage areas at Village. I mean, there's because we shut down Bell, so we maxed out all of our other schools for classroom space. And we talked about tents, but then the idea of safety came up because it's got health safety, air quality safety, but unfortunately in the situation we all live in now, we live in places, kids are behind locked doors for reasons right now.
To kind of go along with what Megan is saying, I think it's important maybe just to show everyone like in detail why an everyday in school for the pre-K to 6 isn't an option, and just to make it clear. And because I spoke to John yesterday and he explained it to me and it makes sense, but if you don't know the information, people are going to, I think, get frustrated and say, well, why not? And if it's all laid out clearly, like this is why we can't do it, this is why this model was chosen, it might help in just getting everybody on board. So the suggestion there. Yeah.
Good point, Emily.
Can I ask a clarifying question? And in looking at some of the schedules, I think it makes sense. If I hop over to the vets, so cohort A is in the morning on Monday, cohort B is in the afternoon. Is cohort A in remote learning in the afternoon, or are they working on homework and just kind of existing as students exist after school, and then flipping each day, or are they sort of attending but just in different ways each day?
We'll have things to do. There will be not like synchronous remote sessions, but they will be tasked with work to be done so that it isn't just when your cohort is done, you're done for the day.
Great. That synchronous piece. So thank you, John, who didn't use the word.
One thing that we didn't talk about, but would have to be a school committee thing, is there an appetite for relooking at the calendar? Obviously, we'll have to relook at the start date because John will advise us what the new start date is going to be. But in order to get as many days in as possible consecutively, does it behoove us to look at the calendar and try to just do what the colleges are doing and maximize the learning while we can, fully knowing that when the typical cold and flu season hits, it could get worse?
I think any option that is brought to us is on the table. in my opinion. I think if that is where the direction that the administration starts to think makes sense, then it should absolutely be brought to us for a larger conversation.
I will say on that, just looking through the calendar, because Sarah, I was thinking, could the calendar be adjusted too? But Bill did a really good job of keeping our calendar pretty tight. So there's not a lot of, historically we've had a lot of kind of broken weeks, especially in the beginning of the school year. It doesn't look like we have a lot of those. We've got a PD day here and there, which maybe, especially since we've got some extra training days at the start of the year, we might want to think about how do we kind of structure that so it's as effective as possible throughout the year, because it's different from when we approved this back in February. But, aside from that, especially in the first half of the year, it's basically just, federal holidays, right?
Well, I think that's what my suggestion, that we only go with federal holidays for this year.
I think that's, I'm just looking through December right now. Aside from one professional development day in October, that's all we've got, I think. Oh no, we've got 2 half days for parent conferences. So,
and I do think we had some more days off at the beginning of the year.
I've got the calendar up right now. I don't see it, but aside from, the holidays.
I will say that Joe Miller
we can
and I have had that conversation about the professional development day, if that is something that we could recapture as a school day. And I say this a lot, but I think I'd be remiss not to note Joan Miller being a thought partner and a contributor in all of this work. Not to be specific, but I hear from colleague superintendents who are just at odds with their teachers association, and I cannot say how appreciative I am of the collaboration of MEA with me on this work. It has been so impressive and so helpful in not making muddy waters even murkier. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point, John. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think maybe this was already done, but I think the PD piece was sort of what was spinning in my head with the calendar as well, and just making sure that where our PDs fall, that it doesn't end up impacting one cohort more than another, particularly at that elementary level, but really in anywhere where we've got half days, splits, and that type of thing.
We'll certainly keep an eye on that.
Emily, you look like you want to say something. No, you're okay.
I guess I'll say it. I don't know if this is where we should talk about it, but I know we kind of said the start date is still up in the air. Is that true? Can we comment on how we feel about that?
Please.
So I think starting so late in September is not the best idea, in thinking that maybe we will have to go remote at some point in the winter, that if we can get, as I think someone had mentioned this, get kids in school as we can in the fall, and maybe take some of those extra days and use them to switch to remote, if that has to happen, to use those professional development days there. And then maybe just really we could take a couple of them and be super efficient at the beginning of the school year to get everybody on board, and then get the kids in school as soon as possible. I feel like that's, in my opinion, necessary. But
I think that's a point well taken, and I put a date in the memo that was erroneous. It was just me doing some calendar counting. If the state were to give us 10 days, what would that push it out? And so that is not a proposed start of school date for me. But I also want to be sensitive to making sure teachers feel that they have been provided adequate time to
absolutely
safely with students. So I want to find a balance between the bad date that I put out and what will date for the others.
And I guess that's what I'm saying, to make sure everyone feels good, but then not to go too far into September.
I feel strongly about giving that I think if we give those 10 days, and they're 10 really meaningful days of professional development, which I have the utmost faith in John and Nan that they're going to be very impactful, that we are going to set our teachers up for success, and giving them the tools and the know-how to use those tools to really teach successfully remote. Because what we saw is in the spring, and I think what we'll see again, is when a jump happens, it's not going to be slow, most likely. We could have another situation where your children go home one day and you find out they're not coming back. And that means that happens to a teacher too. So I think that if we give them these 10 days and they have a robust program for professional development on those for remote learning, that we're going to be setting them up for success, which in turn is going to set our students up for success, and we're really going to maximize outcomes. So again, like, it's not ideal in any way, shape, or form for those 10 days to be blocked together. But I think given our current situation, it is the best way to maximize outcomes, because I think we'd be kidding ourselves to not acknowledge we will end up in remote at some point for some period of time, and it could happen, and most likely will happen suddenly.
I guess, Sarah, just to follow up on that point, one thing I do just want to, I don't know if caution's too strong of a word, but just to consider is absolutely staff training is imperative, especially in this environment. But in my head, I'm thinking that we will have to adjust and pivot as we move along. And especially if we're moving into a remote situation, that I would like to have some of those days so that as we make adjustments or pivot or new technology, we've got the ability to use some of those training days at that point. So that's my only 2 cents on that. The other thing is, I guess, you know, it depends on when the start date's going to be, but just thinking about students that get the summer services, I know 2 or 3 weeks might not seem like that long, but for students who need those services, it is very important. So I guess just understanding if there's any room for kind of making sure that, you know, we're not putting students at on a back foot when they start. Is there any way to continue those services a little bit longer, provide something for students, especially if we're having a later start date?
Eric and I are currently having those conversations, Megan, because as we're looking at that first day of school changing, can we augment what we're doing in ESY now to extend it? So that's
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think those 10 days also are an opportunity, and I think I'm stealing Seth's thunder, but it's an opportunity to kind of ready families too. And I wonder if one of those days or part of those days could be about some type of workshop to train the parents on how to facilitate maximizing results on our end too. Because as a parent, I felt completely inept. I didn't know how to use some of these platforms. I didn't really understand the expectations. I kept calling Bill and saying, can we have another parents' night? Can we have like a virtual parents' night where like I get the little folder but virtually, and they explain to me what's going on? But we were all thrown into it. So I wonder if we set that up instead of, you know, the third week of school, the way we do parents' night now, that it's during that period so that everybody starts off on the same page, working together towards the common goal.
Yes, I think that's an interesting idea. Run that through reopening, especially as we look at the calendar for what that first day of school will be. I think I don't want to put something out there that we're not going to be able to do, but the childcare conversation was something that Nan and I sat and talked about extensively this morning. That's very much on our radar of how could we support families in an out of the box thinking way with the funding that we have and the resources that we have and the community partners that we have. What sort of options might be there? So I'm not suggesting that we're doing anything, and I'm not suggesting that we're doing nothing, but it is part of the discourse that's going on right now, because we know that that is a significant piece I will also say the districts that are announcing they're going fully remote, that's even more challenging for families because now they're being told, you know, if they're back to work, which many of us are back to work, that they're going to be in need of 5 days a week, week after week, of figuring these schedules out.
If I can circle back to Sarah, may I go back to a question posed by Megan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, both Megan and Emily were trying to tease out a little bit more about how we landed where we did with the hybrid. And I went back into my notes and I found a couple of key pieces to the K through 6 model. One, the AM, PM, if we were to do 2 sessions in one day in person for kids, the blocks of instructional time would have to be reduced to accommodate getting kids in and out, and then sterilizing and then back in, so that the teachers felt like they didn't want to lose that instructional time by reducing the time in front of them. And then another component of having them all in at the same time, or Megan, your suggestion about having 2 classrooms set up where you're in one room and then you go into the next room, was around staffing and around having certified teaching the way that they had hoped to be able to roll it out, and that was a concern for teachers as well.
Thanks, Nan.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on this?
I just want to acknowledge that everyone's in mourning. Our educators are mourning the way that they've learned to teach and love to teach. Our parents and our students are in mourning for the way that they used to, you know, experience school. And it sucks. It just sucks. There's no other way. But I do think that we're well on our way to the best of a bunch of not great options.
I agree with that completely. And I know for sure that everyone is working, you know, just nonstop on making sure that these plans are airtight in the end, that, you know, that they're changing, that they're dynamic, and I think it deserves saying that, you know, what's due to the state on Friday is not what's due to the state on the 10th, and that, you know, there will be other passes at all of these plans. And, you know, I feel like I'm on like a pendulum with this whole thing, that, you know, a month ago I thought one thing, and then 2 weeks ago I thought a completely different thing, and now I'm back to this other thing, but it's a little changed as well. So, you know, I can only imagine where in 2 weeks or a month or 6 weeks, this is all going to sort of take shape and actually be put into motion.
And then there's an athletics committee, which the biggest joke in town, I swear, is that I'm on that. Fully acknowledge that. And when I came to the first meeting, I was like, I've got nothing for you folks, nothing to offer. But I was so impressed. And of course, I had to jump in because I can't keep my mouth shut. But I was so impressed at how they're like, all right, same as everybody else. Like, goal is to get kids in person. If we can't get kids in person, how can we still like give these kids these outlets? And I've just been impressed at the out of the box thinking there too. So I just wanted to put that out there.
All right. Well, I will move us along if that's where we're at. So that that takes us then to the financial piece of our meeting. And it brings us to our schedule of bills. It was a relatively significant schedule since it's been a while since we've met. And I believe in keeping with the way that we're signing and everything, everybody should have all of the schedules in their Dropbox, but that I think it was half of them were signed by me and half of them were signed by Sarah since I was out of town. So is Michelle with us at this point? Oh, yes, I see you, Michelle. So does anybody, I'll ask for the motion. So can I get a motion to approve the identified schedule of bills totaling $486,460.27?
So moved.
Sarah, did you say second? Okay, so Megan and then Sarah seconded. All right, so does anybody have any questions on any of those? Because I know that just to point to is that majority of those schedules were still in FY20, and then some of them are FY21 as well.
And one actually got switched after we signed. Allison wanted us to switch what pot it came from, and Michelle gave a really great explanation on why that was happening, and I felt really comfortable with it. So
great. All right, well, no further questions, then I'll roll call. Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron?
Yes.
Sarah Fox?
yes.
Megan Taylor?
Yes.
David Harris?
Yes.
All right, so that passes 5-0, and that brings us to service and maintenance contracts.
Can I ask a finance question of Michelle before, or because we had waited for the finance question about the reopening that I had for her?
Yeah, so that, hold on. Oh, yes, we do need to. Can we do the votes first, and then Michelle, we
Sure.
keep things out of order so that you would be here. So okay, so can we ask Michelle the questions on the memo that was dropped to us late yesterday at the end of that? I think that's where that makes the most sense.
Okay, so which memo did you want to discuss?
You know what? Just for people who are sticking around on the call, let's do that right now so that we really take care of reentry when we have the most people present. So the memo is
The financial streams, right?
yes, the COVID-19 related lines.
Yes. I received a couple questions last week about what we have available for COVID related costs. So I put this together yesterday, so that's why it originally wasn't in the packet. It wasn't planned to be there, so I apologize for the lateness of it. But we have various pots of money which we will be able to tap into to fund all of these various costs. And for the most part, there are very few restrictions on what we can spend these monies on as long as they are COVID related. So announced back in the late spring, early summer, the town was granted an amount of $1.8 million. At that point, every single town department submitted what they thought was going to be their rough estimate of costs between now and the end of December. In dealing with this, we primarily estimated our costs to be focused on PPE and sneeze guards and signage. So really that's what we focused on at that time. And our estimate was $454,725. So that amount of money has been set aside by the town for school needs related to COVID costs. But I should mention that the town administrator has mentioned that if our costs are higher than that and higher than our available funds, that we may be able to dip back into that bucket of money and be able to have some more of our costs covered by that 1.8 million, because we surely don't want to turn anything back at the end of December that we haven't spent. The second amount on that memo that I listed, and these are all in the box towards the second half of the memo on the one page, is Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Grant. This is the grant that was initially announced probably a couple months ago. We refer to it as our ESSER grant. And this is in the amount of $91,612. The amount has been specified by the Department of Ed and has been released. We will be submitting an application on how we will be spending this, this funding. And I do want to note that this is the only pot of money that is actually able to be spent over a 2-year period. So this can, you know, does not need to be spent right away whatsoever. So I think we should be very methodical in what we determine we're going to be spending this grant on. And I'll be working very closely with Nan and John and the team to determine, you know, what we're going to use that for. The second grant, but third item on the funding summary is called the School Reopening Grant, or the Coronavirus Funding Grant. This is based on an amount of $225 per student, and based on what we submitted for students back last October. So we're estimating that we're going to receive $680,175. This is also a grant. It is not a competitive grant, so we will automatically receive this amount of money, assuming we put an application in. We just need to determine how we're going to spend that money. That application is also due by the end of August, but does need to be spent by the end of December. So we need to determine what we will be spending that on. I have a feeling that a lot of that will be going towards technology. The third grant and fourth line on that summary is the Remote Learning Technology Essentials Grant. This is actually a competitive grant. There's not a specific dollar amount that we would be eligible for, but it is based on need. In talking with Nan earlier last week, we're hoping to be able to submit for this one. We're hoping that we are awarded it because we certainly have some technology needs. This grant does have a matching requirement, but the matching requirement can be taken from one of the other grants or the town portion of that 1.8 million. So certainly we do not have to have that matching amount come from our operating budget, which is great news because that's usually how grants work. So we don't know what that amount of money is going to be, but anything we receive through that grant will be greatly you know, appreciated and used towards meeting our technology needs. And then finally, we have a budget line item within the school's operating budget that we, you know, we established in late June, I want to say. It was probably later half in June, where we funded $168,699. And that can be used for any COVID cost whatsoever, or it can be used for non-COVID costs, but right now it's in a COVID-related line. I do want to mention that all of the state and federal funding sources cannot be used for any revenue shortfalls. Right now we have kindergarten, preschool tuition in a revolving fund, and we also have our food service revolving fund. Both of those funds will see a decrease in revenue of some sort, shall we operate in a remote environment once again. So we could actually use that $168,000 to offset some of our revenue shortfalls in the revolving funds if needed. Otherwise, we will have to either dip into those fund balances, depending on how much they are during the rollover, which will happen later next month, or we will have to absorb that within the operating fund. So altogether, the funding that we currently have in place for COVID-related costs is $1,395,211. And that basically is the minimum we have available, because we do have an additional ability to tap into the town's funds, and we do have an additional ability to receive this technology grant. So I think we're in a pretty good position overall. I mean, it's certainly, we need to go back now and look at some additional costs now that we have an idea of how we'll be reopening. For example, we are in the process of ordering desks for a few of our schools because we were using tables in those locations. So we're ordering desks right now. The METCO program, if we're having split days at the high school and middle school level, we're going to have additional busing costs. So we will certainly need to take those into consideration. We have additional staffing costs in terms of just the disinfecting and the cleaning. So we are looking to hire a temporary staffing firm for some of those janitorial needs. Obviously, we had the PPE budgeted, and that was part of the 1.8 million. So we knew those costs early on. And then our technology needs. Our technology needs are, you know, can be almost limitless. And really, if we have these funds available, we really should, you know, focus on what we need to make a great learning environment and give us all the tools to our staff and students so that we can do the best job possible. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot away.
Excellent summary. Thank you very much.
David, did you have questions, or are you good?
No, I was just saying that's a great summary. It clarifies a lot of things that we've been hearing. So thank you very much for that. And
yeah, that was really helpful. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you.
So my main concerns for finance is mostly these revolving funds, because as you noted, we can't draw for off these other grants for lack of revenue, which they would count as. So the activities fees will also, I would assume, be down. So that's one thing to look at. The food service, the kindergarten. I think that my biggest concern, to be perfectly honest, is the kindergarten and pre-K tuition. The kindergarten tuition, I think, is $450,000, and I think we need to be prepared that given the reality that we're going to have very limited, if anybody, enroll in full-day kindergarten. So we really need to take a hard look at that because we can't pull that from those grants. And then also the transportation piece, Michelle, are we getting any numbers in yet for our out-of-district placement transportation numbers? Because that's a big driver. Whereas they're going to have to change how they transport and how many children at once. So I have to assume their costs are going to climb.
Well, we are looking at, we had a transportation subcommittee meeting last week, and Eric and Peg were focused on looking at the special ed transportation piece. We're also looking at some in-town transportation that we were providing to special ed students that were not required. So we do expect we'll see some, you know, some savings there. It certainly won't cover a huge amount of increased costs, but we are diving into that right now to see what that's going to be.
And then in order to minimize the additional expense in the METCO transportation, is there a way to coordinate with NAN on the teaching and learning to see how we can line up those cohorts a bit better to maybe limit the number of buses that we're running back and forth in any given day?
Yes, that will be our plan going forward at this point, to see, you know, how the schedules go together and what we can do. NRT is our transportation contractor for our METCO transportation, and they had reached out to me a couple of days ago to see if we were going to need additional buses. I do not believe we'll need additional buses, but I believe we might need additional runs if we're having split days. So we will be investigating that with them.
And do we anticipate any issues with delayed procurement for technology, seeing as there's probably going to be an increased demand for technology, I would say, particularly the level at which schools are utilizing?
I am not directly involved with the technology committee. I am part of the larger committee, but I do know that we were seeing some backlog with Chromebook orders, Chromebook availability. We had ordered about 200 Chromebooks in June, which are coming in or have just come in. I'm not sure of the specific status of that, but I do know that Kathy was trying to prep orders as quickly as possible to get them into the pipeline. So while we may not be able to secure as much technology as we would hope, we're certainly working on that, and I think we'll be in decent shape.
John, you had your hand raised at one point.
I'm just working with Jasmine Boyd Perry on the METGO process and what METGO schools are doing. And she is she was on the conference call with NAN for a couple hours yesterday. And so we're looking at the number of students and probably putting them in an afternoon cohort whenever possible, so that they are here for after school activities, whatever those might be. We'll wait to hear from the athletics and activities subcommittee a little more on that. But we are working with Jasmine on the Medco piece.
Great. All right. Any other questions for Michelle on that? Okay, Michelle,
One more. Michelle, do you foresee how many months could we sustain the full fiscal year with this 1.3?
Unfortunately, everything but the 91,000 has to be used by the end of December. So even if it covered our costs, we are not able to incur those costs past December unless the federal government makes some type of extension to that.
Are we allowed to prepay or prepay, additional transportation costs or anything like that, or no?
No, not if it's a specific periodic cost. If it's an annual cost, then yes, we are able to pay for an entire year. But if it's a monthly cost, then no, we are not able to.
all right, that takes us to the service and maintenance agreements contracts. There was one for the elevator maintenance. Michelle, do you want to speak?
Yes. And I do apologize. I thought we were going to have multiple ones. We found a hiccup with our fire alarm maintenance bid, so we'll probably be putting that back out to bid. But that we are still investigating that at this time, and it was also a joint contract with the town, so I need to speak to the fire chief regarding that. So today we just have one award of maintenance contract for elevator maintenance. This is a contract jointly that we participate in with the town, and we put this out to bid. We had previously been with City Elevator. Their contract expired on June 30th. And so we put this out to bid. Bids were opened on June 24th. We received 3 bids, one from City Elevator, the incumbent from Woburn, in the amount of $59,090. One from Embry Elevator, also out of Woburn, for $51,400, and one from United Elevator Company out of Marshfield for $57,710. So the low bidder is Embry Elevator. We have checked out their references, and actually in one of my previous districts, we also used them. So it was kind of nice to see a familiar name with someone who I had pretty positive experience with. So that was encouraging. And we have discussed this with the town and made sure that they are also on board, and the Board of Selectmen will be voting this at their next scheduled meeting. But we do recommend that we award a 1-year contract to Embry Elevator in the amount of $51,400, and that contract will have 2 one-year options for contract extension.
Great. So Megan, I saw your hand up, but I'm going to just ask for the motion and then we can discuss it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so can I get a motion to award a 1-year contract of the elevator maintenance contract to Embry Elevator of Woburn, Massachusetts in the amount of $51,400, and to authorize the chair to sign the contract on behalf of the committee?
So moved.
I'm going to do Megan first and Sarah second. All right, Megan, I know you have a question.
Michelle, thanks for this. Is this a situation where we are required to take the lowest bid?
Typically, unless, oh, hold on, sorry. Dog's pushing at the door. I apologize. We are required to take the lowest responsible bidder. So unless we can prove that the lowest bidder did not meet our specifications, or they're not responsible given some poor feedback from references, then yes, we are required to take the lowest bidder.
Okay. And then you mentioned a contract negotiation as part of this. So that's just an automatic piece. We don't have to go out to bid for that again if we want to extend their contract. Is that how it works?
Correct. We have the
And then is
option.
there,
If we are happy, we have the option to extend their contract for 1 year and then 1 more year, but they do not have the option to back out. Basically, it's our call only.
okay. And are there rate increases with each extension? It stays
Nope,
the same
the rate
price?
stays the same, which is actually really good for us.
Yeah, that is good. Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on that? All right, so it looks like we lost David again. I'm not sure what happened to him, but so that's just the 4 of us. So Sarah Gold, yes. Sarah Fox,
Yes.
Emily Barron,
Yes.
and Megan Taylor.
Yes.
All right, so that motion passes 4-0. So that then takes us back around to the agenda items that we moved earlier. So that starts us with the acceptance of donations. Michelle, do you want to take, it looks like that memo's from you as well.
It is. I was just writing memos like crazy the other day. It's good though, get it all out.
Yeah.
So yes, as we have discussed at previous meetings, we had a parent volunteer, Samantha Rosado, volunteer to run a fundraiser for us for our summer meal program, which is fabulous because Bill McAuliffe, the previous superintendent, felt very strongly that we did not want to continue with the program if we were going to run into a deficit situation. So our estimate of the cost of the program after the state and federal reimbursement was a shortfall of just over $2,900. And within very short order, Samantha set up a GoFundMe fundraiser. She also accepted donations through Venmo, and we also received some checks, and then actually other parents donated their students' lunch balances that were on account with us already. So between those four methods, we collected a total of $3,004.75, which should cover our shortfall. And obviously that was an estimate, so we'll be right in that ballpark of where we estimated the cost of the summer program would be. And the summer program is continuing to operate and be very successful. So I thank you all for agreeing to run that program, because while it's not serving a huge amount of families, it is serving about 60 kids per day. Those 60 kids really rely on it. So it's a wonderful thing that we can actually, do for the community. So at this point, we just need to officially accept that donation. Samantha has sent out thank yous to every single person who donated through her. And a couple of them remained anonymous when they came to us, but I do have a list of the rest of the donations.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And again, a huge thanks to Samantha Rosado for everything she's done for that fundraising. So I will ask for a motion to accept donations totaling $3,004.75 from various individuals to be used for the summer meal program.
So moved.
Sarah Fox moved.
Second.
Emily, second. Any questions for Michelle on that?
We sent Samantha a formal thank you note, right?
I don't believe so, but I will make sure we do if we haven't already. Absolutely.
All right.
No questions, just thanks again to Samantha and the community and Michelle. Just a good one. Thank you.
Moving into the fall, what was the number? What were we, 7,000 a week? It was that needed to come out of our operating budget to keep that program open?
Yeah, it was in the high sevens. I want to say it was like 7,800, 7,700.
Did that come from one of those line items that you presented? Or no, it's lack of revenue?
No, it would have to be a cost that we have to institute to address COVID costs. So existing staff wouldn't be able to be charged to any of the COVID lines.
Okay. All right. We're going to need to look at where that comes from.
Yes.
I'm always the wet blanket. I'm sorry.
Oh, these are the things I'm thinking. Just don't publicly say a lot of times. Yes.
Write that thank you note. We might need to call her again.
All right, I will call for the vote. Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron,
Yes.
Megan Taylor,
Yes.
Sarah Fox.
Yes, and thank you again to Samantha and everybody who donated for her.
So that vote passes 4-0. All right, so I think for our final agenda item today, we have the district letterhead logo discussion. So basically, John is looking to order new letterhead and new business cards for the new people in the district. And we just sort of, there was I believe, let me see if I can pull this up and so that I have person's name. A visual arts teacher, Miss Leah Bordieri at the high school, has put together some drawings with the Marblehead M. We all had 2 different logo, we had the business card mock-up and then 2 different letterhead mock-ups using the M with the hat on it. They look really sharp. So what we are tasked with is we need to approve the business card template that was in the Dropbox, as well as approve one of the letterhead options so that they can get things ordered.
Do you mind putting them up just so the public can see? Because there was definitely a lot of work that went into these.
Sure, I will start with the.
Oh, John's got it. Just everybody zoom in on John.
I will still look for it in mine.
So it is, her image was in color. My screen's really bad, so it looks black and white, what John's holding up. Are we gonna have them printed in color or in black and white? In color?
In color.
All right, let me share my screen. This is the business card that will come up. So that'll be the front of the card. And then that will be the back of the card.
Can you go back up a second?
Yes, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. That's the front. I'm going to go down as well.
No, I just was wondering because John's added all these extra avenues for communication that people are really excited about. Would this be the appropriate place to like put some of them, but probably not? I think just the website is, I was just thinking like, I haven't done business cards in a while, so I don't know if people put that stuff on them now.
I think everything that's been developed is linked off of the marbleheadschools.org. So probably so that we don't have too many things going on a business card.
Yeah.
And that one will always remain the hub, regardless of what is linked.
Okay.
And then I will pull up letterhead option 1. They're very similar. I actually had to go back and forth multiple times to figure out what the difference was. So the difference is on this letterhead option 1, there's a line underneath the artwork and writing, and then nothing else. And then on option 2, there's no line underneath, but there's a line in between the Marblehead Public Schools and then from the desk of whoever is coming from.
Visually, I like the line underneath. I think it's more in line with what you see often.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives, I think, a clear definition between like the header and the body.
That was really the only thought that I had of sort of what was tipping me, and I just was wondering if there was any kind of trend on letterhead that where it's pushing towards the line in the middle or the line underneath.
I mean,
what's
the
hot trend in letterhead?
Letterhead.
The graphic person in me is gonna get nitpicky, like where it says the logo on the left, I feel like should it be equal to the size of what's on the right, height wise?
Just slightly.
Yeah. I saw that too.
Yeah.
It needs to be like the same.
Yeah, and should the M, yeah.
It needs to go up just a little bit.
John, you're the one that has to use it the most. Which one do you like the best?
Right.
I'm just thrilled to be able to bring such highbrow conversation to here in Marblehead.
I mean, important decisions.
This is so much lighter and more relaxed than the reentry conversation.
It is, and it's almost embarrassing, so I'm going to apologize to the Facebook group that is going to skewer me for having a logo conversation after the reopening dialogue. I will say that I'm very appreciative of Lisa in my office and the graphic design teacher at Marblehead High School for collaborating on this, and I don't feel strongly about option 1 or option 2. I think that they're both very nice, and the former letterhead had the town seal, and there was just not a pristine is the wrong word, but a clear image of that. It's all kind of distorted on our current letterhead and logos and stuff. So I like the kind of refresh that this offers.
Yeah, and I love that you used our internal resources wisely.
Absolutely. And I like that it represents the schools. You know, we are the schools within Marblehead, and so I like that it's sort of, you know, I'm always a fan of the little like ways to which you can kind of build the morale and kind of the, I don't know what word I'm looking for. Spend too long.
Branding.
Yes, the branding. Thank you. All right, so it seems, Megan, or Emily, did you have something to say?
Okay.
Okay, so it seems like I'll ask for a motion on the business card first. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the business card template.
Is that it?
That's it.
Oh, so moved.
All right, Megan moved, Sarah second. All right, any comments or further clarity on that one? All right.
I like it.
Yeah, so do I.
Is there more of a usually I'm like such a miser today. Is there more of a cost to having the red background on at the flip side, the dual printing, compared to what we have now? And are we talking like significant, like 50% more, 90% more? Like, is it significant?
I can look into that. I don't know, but I could almost guarantee that having the two-side printed would be more expensive. And if we just have it white with the logo on the back, we'll look into the cost and we'll go with the cheap stuff.
Well, I mean, if it's like we're looking at $1,000, but if I don't know how much we print a year, I have no idea. Like, so
well, the hope is to get business cards for everyone in the central office. So
okay.
Business cards for Michelle and Eric and Nan, and so it could be substantial.
Okay. I love the design. I just know that printing can get expensive in multicolor and dual side.
All right, Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron,
Yes.
Megan Taylor,
Yes.
Sarah Fox.
Yes.
All right, so that's 4-0. And then it seems as though sort of the lean was towards, shoot, I've got to pull up which one was which again. I think option 1, yes. So it was leaning towards option 1. So I will just go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the letterhead option number 1.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Emily second. All right, any disagreement with letterhead number 1?
That's the one with the line, right?
The line underneath.
That's
Underneath.
horizontal.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd love to see the Emily. What Emily and I were saying, I'd love to see it a little bigger, but you ask 2 people with design backgrounds, this is the feedback you're gonna get.
I'll work with the team to see if we can make that happen.
She did a nice job. It looks good.
Yeah, that's a really nice job. All right, I will call for a vote. Sarah Gold, yes. Emily Barron,
Yes.
Megan Taylor,
Yes.
Fox.
Yes.
All right, great. So that is all we've got for today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, particularly John and Nan, for the comprehensive conversation around the reentry plan. And we'll look forward to hearing back from the community, as I am absolutely positive we will hear much. Sarah, you and I will get those questions from the chat function and make sure that they get back to John and Nan for the review.
I have a question just on next meeting. I think our next our next meeting is scheduled for the 10th, which is kind of part 2 of our retreat. But do we need to vote what gets submitted to DESE, and therefore would we need to meet prior?
Yes, we do. So yes, we definitely need to have another meeting before the 10th. So the 10th, if I'm remembering correctly, is a Monday.
Yeah, I think so.
So my guess would then be that we would look probably at the 7th.
That's a Friday.
That's a Friday.
I mean, that's fine. But
Guess would be that we'd be working, that we'd want as much time as possible for that plan to really cement. John, correct?
So,
Yes.
not to be a real pain here, but the hope is that we will pass whatever is recommended. But just in case there's any tweaks, like, should we do it Thursday and then it gives time to make any tweaks or adjustments?
Okay. So pushing towards maybe a Thursday evening at that point. So that Thursday the 6th. So why don't we tentatively set for Thursday the 6th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
John?
I'm always for earlier, but 7's good. I serve at your pleasure.
I just say that just because for continuity's sake, and that's when our usual Thursday meetings are. Hopefully we can keep that to keep the meeting to a minimum on the agenda, and maybe even just to that, particularly since we'll be having another meeting, another workshop style meeting on Monday.
Yeah, just a reentry focus, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, if anybody ends up having an issue with that and we need to tweak it, obviously we've got some time before we need to post that. So just reach out and let me know. All right.
Okay.
With that,
While you're booking that, I did what David said. I copied and pasted the chat into a Google Doc and shared it with Nan, because she has our other questions, and Don. But it literally is just a copy of it. It says like from iPhone to everyone. So it's definitely messy, but it's there.
okay, great. Great, thank you. So I can end the meeting without worrying about losing anything or having it go into the abyss on my computer.
Okay.
All right, so I will adjourn us at 1:24 p.m. then. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
bye.
Bye.